Okay. So next, what we'll proceed with is basically the DB setup. Let me just write down the DB stuff once here as well. Database setup part. So create a Postgres DB only for this. Oh, I think Wakanda DB already exists for me. So Wakanda DB, Wakanda user, that's what it exists probably. Let me just try it out once. PSQL
Screen
Wakanda
sharing
user.
start कर.
Oh, let me just start the screen sharing. Okay, here we go. So just setting up the DB part. So I think I have this created Wakanda user and Wakanda DB. I think the database name. Okay. Oh, let me just create that thing. I think I will have to look at my own Medium article.
Neither. So what we can do is maybe we can just drop the database and create it again.
No, like database exists. I will just add this thing, the user thing. So
Oh, so just connect to the database and to grant all privileges.
I have to do the create user thing also. I think the user was not created. So cool. I'll do that. So create user Wakanda user with. That's it, I guess. Cool. So to set up Postgres, what I think there is a standard process for doing it. There is a wrapper for TypeORM that exists here. So they have like wrappers for Sequelize, Nex, and TypeORM. So we will use TypeORM. It's kind of, I think, the most standard way. Um, so here we'll do a we'll need NestJS slash typeorm, and we'll need PG basically. So I'll just install these. So yarn add NestJS typeorm, PG, and PGH store. Cool. So I think the way to do it is somewhat like this. We will write this config, but I'll just break this down a little bit. So let's actually start with this level. I think the breakup part we'll do later on when we need for the testing part. So we have to go to app module, and we have to import TypeORM module, and then we will be doing inside imports. Basically, this is the user module and superhero module and all of that stuff. So one of the things that we'll import is basically TypeORM module dot for root. So TypeORM module.forroot is a function to create a TypeORM module at the root level of the project. And for that, I think this takes a configuration object, which will take, I believe, yeah. So type would be Postgres, and okay, host and all I think would not be needed. Defaults it will take. Database would be Wakanda DB, username. Okay, and then we have like an entities array we need to create. So this is where entities will go. I'll just go to them one by one, and then we need So once that's created, we can do is our entities we can either put it at you know a module level like superhero entity inside there, users entity inside there, or we can have like a entity folder. In fact, we can have a new folder called entities, and so entities are basically model class pattern. So what we'll do is we will have entities in this format. We will have a class user.entity.ts like that we will be having. So we'll have a new file, say user.entity.ts. So here we will create I don't know why it is not getting imported. It is not run. Yeah. Okay. So how we define users basically, there is a README on TypeORM as well. So here all the definition happens using these decorators. So if the user needs to have like a auto-generated ID column, so ID number, and we'll decorate it with primary generated column, and here we will pass this thing auto increment data type. Okay, then user needs to have a username, so that can be string type, and we can make a column, and here we can mark some properties like nullable false. Okay, username won't be nullable, and we can pass a length. Say username is up to 50 characters long, like that we can do, and so I think we will need a one auth ID as well. So in fact, we can use one auth ID as primary. So we can do instead like this primary column and ID number. So our user ID would be basically one auth ID. Yeah, user name we will keep a copy from one auth. We will make a copy here at this level once. Then let's say we want to have a entity for this thing. So we want to have a superhero. So one class one file model is something that NestJS generally tells people to use. So that's why like we will have to create a repository as well. So this is a very small class, but still just creating separate instead of creating one place for all the modules. That can also be done, but I mean let's follow that. It's a good pattern, I believe. We'll have so superhero. This can have like again. there are superhero IDs we actually have. So we can keep a primary generated column once. And so just say, I mean, I'm not getting into too many things right now. Just say superhero and user. Now, how to create basically embedded entities. So there is something called embedded entities. So embedded entity means you want to create a relationship between two items. So what will happen is, like, if user contains a superhero element, so here we can do column, and here we will write type is of superhero, and I think that's how it's written. Yeah. This is basically how foreign key relationships happen. So if we want basically superhero a user to have like a superhero ID, and basically we want user object to have a superhero object embedded inside it, like user belongs to superhero, that kind of relationship if we want. So we can do like type superhero, and then we'll have this thing embedded inside that. So every user object can have a superhero object, like that kind of relationship we can do. I think also like unique kind of relationships if we want. So those things are also there, like one-to-one relationships if we want. So
So I guess this type parameter specifies or helps with the polymorphic relationships, as I can understand.
not technically, this is just to do relationships in general, for relationships, not necessarily for polymorphic. So we can
We are
create a
not even.
one-to-one also. So like if you want to do a one-to-one relationship between user and superhero, so in that case it will be somewhat like this. I mean, there is an annotation called one-one, 1-to-1. So one-to-one will contain type of superhero, and then I think there is this other thing.
What exactly is this type argument?
Type actually tells like which model to be used for creating this relationship. Like when you are doing in SQLize, like user belongs to superhero, superhero has one user, that kind of thing we are doing. No, so here that's what this type is telling, that user has a superhero field, which is basically a foreign key to this data type. Now you have to write it twice because this is for TypeScript completion, and this is the decorator one is what it uses to generate the actual table and metadata. Then we have to do, I think, from superhero. The superhero dot user kind of thing also has to be done. So we'll have to do it the other way around. So here we will have to write one to one type user, and we'll have user of user type. Then we'll do user. Yeah. So this way, if we create the type, so inside user object, superhero object would be available, and inside superhero object, user object would be available. So that's how this is basically done, one-to-one relationship. So we write the data type is superhero, and this defines the backward relationship. Like how to get a user from superhero, we get superhero.user, and how to get a superhero from user, we do user.superhero, like that. But this, I mean, it can be nullable as well. So that part is there. We'll do like superhero can be nullable. Here. Cool. But this side is not going to be nullable because superhero can only, like, superhero object can only exist if it's mapped to a user. Like, we can't have a superhero object which is not mapped to a user. Like, not all users are superheroes, but all superheroes are definitely users.
Makes sense.
So these two entities we have, right? Now, apart from entities, what we'll need is inside when we create database, we'll have to create this repository pattern stuff. Okay, so it is not directly said here. So we'll have to tell what entities we need at our app module, this entities level. Here we'll have to take, say, user and and superhero. So we'll have to define all the entities that we need while booting up the DB inside the app module, the DB that we have added here at this level. Then after that, we need basically for every module, we have to tell what entities it depends on. So for example, the user module, say it depends on user entities. So here inside the user module, we will have to add like this here inside the imports. So there's a TypeORM module for feature function which generates only the entities for module level. So user module needs user entities. If it might need superhero entity too as well. We will see. If it does, then we will have to add superhero class as here as well. We'll see that. And the superhero module will need superhero thing. So we'll need imports, and here we'll do type module dot for feature, and we'll have to write superhero. Yep. So this is done. So at this level, if I run the project, I think the DB will get created. Let me just quickly check with that. I think if the DB has some changing databases /c, right?
Correct.
So /c will go to DB and DT is describe tables.
Describe tables.
Oh, so and drop. Okay. So none of that. Oh, I think the owner I had made Black Panther. The original one. So Wakanda user, Wakanda pass is fine. Okay. Earlier when I had made the DB, I had made, I think, Black Panther and Wakanda Forever was the password, if I remember correctly. I just made the DB, just was trying out some relations back then. Anyway, we just made new ones here, so not an issue. Okay, so let's boot up the project once. Let's see. So TypeORM initialize. Let's see if that has happened or not. Yeah, so superhero table has been created and user table has also been created. By the way, how to define the column? Slash
/t.
Yes. It has got ID integer, superhero ID and CA ID, and it has got this primary key, unique constraint stuff as well, and then /d of user. What ID indexes? So this stuff. Okay. I think the one-to-one reference did not work. Let me see why, because that should have had happened. One-to-one relationships, how to do entity and one-to-one file. Okay, so which side needs the join column? We have to add the join column stuff as well. So I think user should have a superhero ID, which we can do that then. So if we do it on the user side, we'll do. Yeah, we have it now, right? We have table user constraint fk this foreign key superhero ID, and we have the superhero ID inside users.
Oh,
so we need to add this join column params for that to work. And this should only be on one side, like the side inside which you want the this thing foreign key column. So we want superhero ID inside user, then we'll do it in this side. If we wanted user ID in superhero, we would have done it that side.
oh.
Cool. Makes sense. Now let's do is what we will do. Yeah. So how we can fetch basically particular items. We can add some superheroes manually as well and do it, or we can get superheroes. So stuff like that. How to do? Let's see. So this thing is needed now. Basically, a repository feature is something that we need. We can add repositories inside the services and do it that way. So for the user service, now if I need all the users, for example, so there would be superhero and user service. So user service, we now need to do get all users, which will actually fetch data from all the superheroes. So here what we need is there is this need of something called a user repository. So to do that, what we need is we need a constructor like this, and we need to inject a repository. So what a repository does is like TypeORM has a repository pattern. So if you see in Node.js, what happens is that we create, let's say, users, we create using db.define and user, and we define a table and we define the properties here, right? Now, what happens is that there are two things. So the user's object itself is what we do is to do things like users dot create or users dot find one and all of that stuff, right? And then when we do this user dot create, this generates an object of say user type, which has a data type where it will contain say ID and username and all of that stuff, right? So these are your entity objects, which when we do user dot create or user dot find one, we get objects of this type. Okay. So we would technically have say a user instance class, and every user is going to be of this user instance class. User instance class is something that will contain ID, number, username, string, this kind of stuff. Correct. And this users object that we get by db.define, that has no relation to user instance. It is the function inside which the create, find, those methods exist. Right. So here the corresponding thing what happens is in this thing TypeORM, this any user object that is created, that will be of the class user. Okay. and this user class will have all of those things like ID number and username string. Those things will exist. And what was the purpose of users, this thing, right? That purpose is fulfilled by user repository. So we will have, say, a user repo which would be of this data type, and then on user repo we can do this find and user repo dot create and user repo dot whatever it is, delete, and those kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
Totally. So this is something similar that we are using in hiring blocks.
Yeah. So the repository is the accessing object for this thing, the table, and the user class is the class of which instances are created when we create rows.
Totally.
So that by that sense, now when we do get all users, what we will do? We will do is this. We will make it async, and then we will make it. And we will return this dot user repo dot find, and we will return all users. And then the promise would not be of user type, it would be of user array. Data type perfectly matched. Right. Now you see things automatically start failing because of TypeScript. Now because service I have changed, so in controller I will have to change as well. In controller this will also have to be of type
User.
we have to import this. Okay, so this works, and then for one particular user we will have to do so get user by ID will be doing user has primary column ID, right? So we'll do user ID string return. So this will return user object. So and then the controller level stuff will also need to change. This will be get user by ID. Like, so now we can actually make requests and see the requests are correct or not. So if you go to user/6, we will not get anything technically, which is fine. And if we make a call to users, we will again get empty data here. But so logging is actually, why is it not happening? I think we can enable logging at this level. Okay, so that is also generated, like all the construction stuff. And then if I make a user / users, so this is correct, right? User.id username. This is making a select query for all items, and if we do user/1, it's making a call where parameter is equal to 1, and the logging is actually much more beautiful as well, or by default.
But
It shows the parameters as
one thing about NestJS is it is handling async routes by default.
yeah,
So
any function
this
can be marked async. So that is there. It will handle them automatically. So the generated code actually, if you look at module/user/user controller.js, so it is like proper async await, like depends on your ts config. If you are using old version of Node, then you can do ts config to target ES5, it will generate promise based dot then calls as well. So yeah.
Express is bad at handling async middlewares.
Yeah, Express you have to manually turn things to async and then do the manual await and all of that stuff. So here you can directly return these things directly. Correct. In fact, here the awaits are not needed in the service. If I remove the await, in fact, so then also the promise gets handled automatically. So it will do eager await automatically. So I can do await here and try catch if I want to. But if I want to let the error permeate one level up, then I can just return directly this.
Nice.
In fact, we can let this be not be async as well. And in that case, in users controller, up till this level also, we can keep on permeating stuff till here. So full promise pass through is available.
Nice.
As this is a framework that has been written after the existence of async await, so
Makes sense.
so legit stuff exists. Yeah. So this DB query is working now. This works actually on prod, but if I run test, I think here we will have some issues right now. So yarn run test. If I do, there would be some tests that will probably fail. Yeah. So the tests that will fail, I think let's take them one by one. I think this is important to fix it properly. So the first thing that will fail is cannot find module user.entity from users.service.ts. So this happens. So let's start from here. So user.service.ts. So if we go here, that's strange. User.service spec. Here it is failing. So here it is failing because cannot find module user.entity. Okay.
So what about the node path?
Let's run this test specifically on this src/module/ what's the module superhero modules users/user.service spec.ts. So this Oh, I think the path is not correct. That's why. So that we can handle. So for that, what we will do is there is a way to create paths. TS config paths. Let me just check once. Not this. Just if the this thing are like the relative URLs are too long, there is a way to handle that. So yeah, I think we can do it right like this. /app/star is app in this way. So I think at the rate we can use for that. So if I use at the rate for src, just like it happens in Vue.js, I think at /src if we do for this. In that case, we can write this as I think at the rate.
So in Vue we use tilde for
yeah, tilde for src path. Yeah. You can actually use tilde also here. Let's see if that works. This should have worked. This needs a base URL. This world is dot slash fine and paths. Okay, let's see. That works. Let's reload. Maybe it had not reload the TypeScript config. I think it's working correctly now. So if that's the case, then this also we can turn to at the rate, and this we can at the rate, and this we can turn to at, yeah, good. So let's see once more. Okay, fine. So build works. Let's run the test again. So that I mean the failure happened because of path. So that's not the original failure, but I think it will still not actually run correctly. Okay, this is strange. Does the test have a separate TS config? Fine. Let's okay, if I write it with relative path, let's see what happens. I think the relative path we will probably find out a way to fix it. Okay, so I think the relative path part is, I mean, for now, that problem we'll try to see how to solve it. I think I did that once with the my copy that I had made. Not sure if I did it. So I just created one older one. I don't remember if I set up the path part properly or not.
Oh, so in this you had entities inside the just beside the controllers and everything.
But still, I mean, regardless of that, though, I think it should not have had that issue. But let's see. I think I had created one where it was still separate as well. Yeah, this is the entity separate. Let's see what I did. So there is some way to handle the path. I think there is more than one thing to be changed. Oh, this is still dot dot slash dot dot, I think. So
What I'm thinking is it is because of node path.
search once, I think NestJS TS config paths probably does not work. There is issue around. There would be, I believe, some compiler level, some hacks would be there to control this. Oh, I think I know why it's happening. Actually, why it's happening is because the distributed code probably yeah, I think because the target is ES 2017, so it's not compiling it to old type of code. So maybe we can get back to this later on. So tsconfig paths is a way to load it as per that way. So there is some solution given here. I think this is the accepted solution. So GitHub allows this accepted solution now. I think this is a pretty good thing. It's Stack Overflow kind of stuff.
And the GitHub
So you have
issues
to add
also.
a dsconfig paths bootstrap like this, and then node r this, and then this slash main.js. We can do that. I mean, that's not an issue. So we'll go there. And, this would have a JS file somewhere, I think, like this. Anyway, let's figure that stuff out later because we can. That's a good to have thing, that the red slash stuff, but
Not necessary, obviously.
not necessary right now. So let's fix the actually test problems that are happening. In fact, this would also be then dot dot slash dot dot. This would be same, and this would be the same as well. We'll need to fix it anyway because auto imports would be broken, because auto import would be this src slash, and that would not work. But so now what problem we have right now if we try to run the spec test is that it is of course the problem here is that should be defined and all. Yeah, user slash service spec test. Yeah. So cannot resolve dependencies of user service. Please make sure that the argument user repository at index 0 is available. So I think there are some issues around this at written on NodeJS. In fact, if you use database, so there is some article written here about how to handle the this part testing part. So to do testing, what we have to do is we have to set up a custom provider. Each registered repository is automatically represented as this, where entity name is this. So we will have to wherever we are writing tests. So for example, in user service spec, so we're creating this testing module. We will have to write user service as one provider, and we'll have to add another provider. Second provider has to be of this type. Provide, and it has to get this function get repository token for user, and so there's this mock repository thing. Basically, some user repository has to be provided as mock. So they have shown how to create a custom repository in such a way a repository has to be made accessible. So basically, it needs to know how to get access to the user repository when it's running this test, because when it runs this test independently, this test should also be able to access the user repository. So something like that is basically the situation. That's why it's not able to generate that. Let me see. You can create a mock repository. Yeah, so now I think the test runs, but the test will fail because our earlier definition is not true. If I do get user by ID 10, it will basically now be null. Oh, it's an empty object. It should not be empty object, I think. Oh, sorry. So here I will have to write it like this. I will write async, and I will write here await, and then 2 equal null, because the internal function is now async await function, right? So if I try to get user by ID 10, it should return null, but cannot read property find one of undefined. So now this problem actually starts happening is that we have to provide proper mocking here, because this is not actually properly mocked, because we'll need to provide a repository which can find user. So basically what they say is create some mock repository which will return a hard-coded user 10 so that your tests will pass and you don't need to use the DB. So that's what the definition says. So here is something I was trying to figure out if we can add like a test TypeORM config for maybe just one table, but then the tables will have relationships, so I think that would not be possible as such here. So if I go as per their structure, which they have said to create testing with custom repositories. So in that case, what we'll have to do is we'll have to create a mock repository. So this mock repository we can do like this. Use value we can provide like a folder here. So mocks, and we can have what is it, user dot repository dot mock dot ts, right? So if we have this user dot repository dot mock dot ts somewhere here, we can create like export default const mock user repository.
Default const won't work.
We'll have to so this can have like a function find one, so which takes ID of type number, and it promise dot resolve, and it returns this object which has ID 10 and user 10 like this. Okay. So this kind of mock user repository if I have, which has a mock returning for 10, so then here I can use value basically mock user repository like this, and then I think then this will start.
So mocks is outside the SRC folder.
That also works. That will not have a problem because relative imports, no. So things that are outside SRC, you can reach them via relative imports. If tsconfig, like if there are files which are outside the tsconfig folder, they can be reached via dot fashion. They can be reached. So yeah. So I think this is one way which they suggest is like creating mocks. So these are DB mocks and they return like hard-coded objects like this. And hard-coded objects we can test like if .10 we have. Think
but it's pretty opinionated.
I think we'll have to write like this probably. Okay, so this test has passed. The thing is about the mock part. So this is something I personally don't want to use mocks like this because we'll have to write a lot of mocks for all our DB stuff. What would be better is if we can use a it's I think TypeORM config for a test DB. So I will check that once. Like after this, I think call I will try it out is. So what we can do is here, let's say at the app module.ts, this TypeORM module for app, this I think we can define this inside a separate file, right? This one thing. This if we define inside a separate file and import it here, then I think we can import this module, this TypeORM module here also instead of this, providing a mock repository like that. I think I can provide like imports and pass the same thing here as well. So then we can have like config based thing like that one would probably have database Wakanda DB test like that, the other one, the test one, and the prod one will have this. So we will actually run our test on the test DB and prod one on prod DB. So that way our actually DB will also get tested. We will have to run our test in a certain order so that I think if we have a user create test and then we have a user read test, so show that the create test runs first, then the read test runs, and we will probably need to destroy the entire DB every time we run the test with the test DB. So in that we can do. If we do that, then we will not need to create so much mocks. This is something I don't want to do because as the project grows, we'll have to write too many mocks.
Totally. So in HackerBlocks, what I do is I just sequelize force sync my DB at the start
Test DB.
and the test DB, and then I just seed the basic information. And for every test, there is certain information which is truncated after that set of test is ran. So there
Right.
are two
So
levels
something
that I
like that only I was thinking exactly. So if we can do something like that, so I think let's say if I have DB, let me actually try that out once if that's even possible. So I'll use the same one in both places, but I will still write it, of course, properly like this. So right. So this if I get what you call in the app.module.ts, if I just copy this object here, pass it here. Entities I will just see, so I will have to import user. Yeah, so this test.db.ts and this is the prod one. So that way, what I can do in app module, I can actually insert this prod.db module. So right now they are both the same. Actually, I will just change this db name to the test one. So now if I have the prod.db module here, yeah. So let's see if the app first of all runs. /user/1. Yeah, so that works. Since that works, then for the test one, we can do is let's see, import instead of this provider, if I can get is so the test one, I can actually remove logging. Let's see. There was some problem with logs. Works, I think. We'll just have to fix some more stuff, but I think the queries are running correct only. So that all stuff is working. So I think something like this would be possible. I will just check this, what all other configurations we might need to do, but I think we can do that. So that would be better. We will not need to create so many mocks around this thing. So what I will do is I will just commit the code till here, and I will write some wiki stuff around the stuff we had discussed here, like what all models that we need and what all routes we need, basic overview, and then we can go ahead with that. And once this simple level of API starts working, then we can then start working on the front end as well for this.
Totally.
Cool. So I think that makes sense. Let me just